Hello, this is Teresa and I'm back with another video tutorial for Dare to be Artsy. Today I'm using the trellis background die as well as the hibiscus stamp set from Dare to be Artsy to create this card. And I've already die cut the trellis background out of a darker piece of green cardstock, and I found a lighter piece of green cardstock in which I'm going to make my background to go behind the trellis die cut. So I'm using the two tropical leaves that come in the set. I'm using the margarita lime ink from Dare to be Artsy to stamp on this background. And now that I have all the separate pieces, you can see how it will look whenever I combine the stamp background and the trellis die cut background over the top. It makes things look like there's a lot more dimension than there really is without bulk. So I'm just using some liquid glue and a makeup sponge to add adhesive on the back of my die cut. Sometimes I find this easier to do with really intricate die cuts instead of trying to get glue in very small places. So I'm just dabbing on a little bit of glue here and there on the detailed part of the trellis before I attach it to the card. And then once I've done that, I will trim around this so that it is right up to the edge of where the die cut is. So you can see what it looks like now. And now I'm setting up my MISTI to start stamping the leaves and hibiscus flowers. Since I'm planning on doing some Copic coloring on the flowers, I'm using the Dare to be Artsy black hybrid ink, and I'm using the same margarita lime green ink on the leaves above at the top. And I put them in the MISTI so I'd be able to stamp 2 times or more if necessary. So I'm doing that second stamping on the leaves. And then I will move some stamps around so I can get a third small hibiscus flower and another tropical leaf. And then I'll be ready to start my Copic coloring. Starting with a Y13, I'm coloring the little dots or part of the stamen on the flower. And that is pretty much the only thing I'm going to be using the Y13 color for. And I'm switching to YR15 to color the main part of the petal. I will be adding some shading and dimension with a few other colors that will show up as I pull the caps off and start coloring. I do every petal the same way, so I fill it in with a YR15. Then in that section in the bottom where there's a little area drawn in there that looks like little squiggly lines, I'm adding YR07. And now I'm doing the next petal in the YR15. And I will repeat this process for every single petal. And the only additional thing I will end up doing towards the end is I'll be using an R14 marker to add some more definition to the petals and give them some movement. And now I've zoomed in really close so you can see how I'm adding this detail with a R14 marker. I'm just flicking inward from the ends of the petals. Everywhere you see where the flower has kind of a bend in the outside of the petal, I'm using that as my place to start flicking inwards. And then I also do the same kind of thing in a few places just on the part of the rounded petals sticking outwards, and I add some flicking on the inside of each petal going outward, so there is a little bit of a highlight left. And so now the only thing left is to color the stamen, and I'm using 4 colors for this. I'm using YR16, then I go to YR07, then R14 towards the very bottom, and then just the tiniest bit of R24 at the very base of the stamen. So it's gradually getting lighter as it goes up. So it's darkest towards the center of the flower. And I also felt I needed a little more contrast on each of the petals towards the base of the petals, so I'm adding some R24. And now I have a piece of vellum that I'm going to prepare and stamp my sentiment on. As you can see, I have the die cut leaves kind of just sitting there on the trellis background, but they're not glued on yet. So I'm using Versamark ink. I'm stamping the word Aloha on the piece of vellum, and I'm going to add some white heat embossing, which I do off camera. So now that I've finished it, I'm attaching each one of these leaves directly to the trellis background. The next thing I need to do is take that sentiment strip, and I'm folding folding the edges around so they will be glued onto the back. I'm adding some double-sided adhesive with a tape runner, and then I will place it on the front and then fold the tabs the tabs on the back of that card, and then when glue is added to it and it's put on a card base, it will be secured very well that way. And now I'm going to add the flowers. First, I'm going to add some dimensional squares to each one of them. So I'm using a couple of larger ones and a couple of smaller ones. I'm using one layer on both of the smaller flowers, but by the time I get to the largest one, I'm going to double that up so it stands up a little bit higher than the two of them. And now I'm securing the card panel to the white card base, and this flower is complete. Thank you so much for spending time watching this video with me today. I hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, I dare you to get artsy.